Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Well, thank you. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. And today we're going to talk about building your very first Xamarin.Forms application. We should probably introduce ourselves before we get started.
Yeah, my name is Mark Smith. I'm a program manager at Microsoft for the Microsoft Learn product, as well as Xamarin University.
My name is Adrian Stevens. I'm a senior content developer. I actually report directly to Mark. I also work for Xamarin University and Apex Learning. And so we do a lot of development content, a lot of training content, done a lot of Xamarin, a lot of Azure as well. And yeah, today we're going to talk about cross-platform mobile application development. Let's get started. So we thought we should introduce Xamarin before we jump into some code. And so Xamarin really effectively it's Microsoft's answer to mobile for .NET developers. So we actually call it the Visual Studio Tools for Xamarin. And it allows you to create iOS and Android applications in C# and .NET. Here you see a great example. I think we've got both an Android device here and an iOS device. And the magic here, of course, it's C#, it's .NET, but it's also code sharing. So we can use the same business logic and possibly the same UI definitions to deploy our mobile applications, both Android and iOS.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Xamarin is when it originally started, the whole idea was code sharing. So I could build all my business logic in C#. I could even take existing logic that I perhaps had in an application and reuse it inside my mobile apps and leverage the UI technology of the platform itself. So for iOS, I would be building an iOS-specific UI. For Android, I'd be building an Android-specific UI. And a lot of our customers said, man, what we really want to do is we love the idea of sharing our business logic, but I'd like to be able to create a single UI definition that I then share across those devices as well, which is really nice for, say, enterprise applications or applications that display data in forms. And so we came up with Xamarin.Forms.
Which is exactly that. It allows us to share our UI definition across Android and iOS, but it's more than just that. Because, of course, we're talking about C# and .NET, and that runs in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Of course, Windows, UWP.
Right.
Of course, we've got, Xamarin actually has Mac support as well.
Right. So you can build a desktop app for Mac, for Windows. We've got, of course, Android and iOS. That's where we started.
Right, but they support not just mobile devices. They support tablets, of course, and phones, but they also support TVs.
Right.
Wearables, watches. All right, you got one right there. Fantastic. And so what's really exciting, we're going to show you a product called Xamarin.Forms. And as Mark said, a shared UI definition. And it's going to run on Android and iOS, but it's also going to run on Windows. You can use it for Mac OS, use it for wearables, use it for tablets, for TVs. So a really big device surface, shareable code. Let's jump into it.
Yeah.
So how do we get started with this?
So Xamarin tools come with Visual Studio. So if you install Visual Studio 2017, all you have to do is go to the installer, and you can see here we've got the mobile development with .NET. I mean, that's the key thing here. If you're a .NET developer, you can build a mobile app. You're using the same exact language, the same tools, the same frameworks that you're used to, but leveraging it to be able to build an iOS, Android, or wearable app. By simply selecting this workload, that gives you all the support you need in Visual Studio to do this.
All right, it's fully integrated, no extra installs, just let the workload off you go. And so here we have Visual Studio, and presumably we have the workload installed here, of course. Mark has that.
I hope so. My goodness.
Hope so.
If we don't, we're in trouble today.
Well, let's find out. Let's try and make a brand new. Let's make a Xamarin.Forms application.
Okay.
Let's walk through the process of Visual Studio. So
and Mark, I could do this in a couple of places. So notice in Visual C#, Get Started, there's mobile app here. We also have Android here. We have Apple TV, Apple Watch. And we're going to go, and of course, iPhone and iPad down here. I'm going to go cross-platform. So this is how we get to a Xamarin.Forms app. And we'll just call it App 1, that's fine. I'll put it on my desktop, and I click OK. And I get this second screen.
Yeah, we've got a few options here. So notice we have our platform selection. So we talked about Android and iOS. It also supports Windows via UWP out of the box. So we're going to make an application, file new, supports 3 platforms. And then we've got another option here is our code sharing strategy. And this just allows us to pick, well, a couple of code sharing strategies. We can use a .NET standard library, which is exactly as it sounds. It's a standard .NET library. It's really the new way of sharing business logic and code. This will be shared across our Android, iOS, and Windows projects, but it's .NET standard. It's .NET standard 2.0.
Right.
So this code is going to be shareable with a lot of other platforms as well. Things like ASP.NET, Core, Mac OS.
Right. Yeah, anything
Excellent.
that supports .NET Standard 2, you can essentially use that library, which is most of your NuGet packages and things like that as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So let's hit OK. Pick our black template. And this is going to create a brand new solution for us.
And we picked the blank template because it's essentially the simplest of the apps that you can build. We do have a master detail view as well, which is very common if you, say, for instance, have a list of items and then you want to tap on one to be able to see a detail screen. Very common paradigm. And then there's also a tabbed paradigm that gives you essentially tabs either on the bottom or top, depending on the platform, and lets you switch between different screens of different information.
So that was quick.
Yeah, there you go.
Excellent. Cross-platform application. A couple of steps. So notice here we have our Solution Explorer. So we have we've got a Visual Studio 2017 solution. And we actually have, I see more than one project. And if we collapse these down, actually we're going to have 4. We've got 4 projects here. So let's have a look. So I'm going to start from the bottom. So notice it says App 1. That's just named after the app, the solution that Mark just made. And notice it says app1.uwp. So this is our Windows project. If we go up the tree here a little bit, we've got app1.ios. This is our iOS project. And then our Android project. And the top one here is interesting. This one's just named after our solutions, our app name. And this is our .NET Standard project. This project is referenced from all 3 of the platform-specific projects. And what that means is the code we place in this project, they get compiled into a .NET Standard 2.0 library, and then we can consume that from our iOS application, our Android application, and our UWP application. We're going to be code sharing across those 3 platforms.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to recognize that we've got these 3 platform-specific projects because Xamarin is not it's not a black box where it's going to build one single binary that runs on all the platforms through some kind of emulator. It builds real native apps. And so that iOS project is going to build a real IPA module that you would install on an iOS device. The Android project is going to build an APK file that installs on an Android device. It's a real native app that's capable of leveraging anything available on that platform. Right? So that's very important to understand. This is not some Flash type technology where it's going to emulate something or run something on every single one of these systems. You are actually building a real native app that looks just like any other native app that you would put on the store.
But with, of course,
with C#.
With C#, yep. With .NET and code sharing. So let's take a look at our .NET Standard project. And there's a couple of cool things I want to point out. Let's do this, Mark. Let's right-click on the solution and show the NuGet packages.
OK.
Or sorry, actually on the project, on the app1 project. Actually, that's perfect. Solution works as well.
OK. Well, yeah, we can do it here too. That's fine. So dependencies, manage NuGet project, or packages.
It's just to really enforce this here. So it's a standard .NET 2.0 solution or project. And then here we see Xamarin.Forms. So we're bringing in Xamarin.Forms as a NuGet package. So standard .NET development practices. Mm-hmm. And this NuGet package actually added to each of our projects. This is how we're able to leverage Xamarin.Forms. That's our UI definition across platform. So let's head over to main page.xaml, I think.
OK.
So we're going to put both our business logic and our UI definition in the .NET Standard project. And out of the box, we get a UI definition for a single page or single screen of UI. And that's defined in main page.xaml. And so who here is a XAML developer? Who else uses XAML for any code development? All right, excellent. Who here has used XML before? There we go, OK.
Yeah. XAML is just a form, is essentially just a UI markup language. The idea is it's represented in XML. Anytime you see an element tag, it creates an object. Anytime you see a property setting, it sets, or an attribute on that element, it's setting a property. These are really just objects. So we're going to create a stack layout. That's just a layout control that organizes things top to bottom or left to right. Inside that, we're going to put a label that has the word, welcome to Xamarin.Forms. Right? So this is just going to create a nice UI that's going to run on my Android device or wherever I decide to deploy it. Notice that up here, I've got my run button, and I can pull this down, and I have several different device choices. So I have a bunch of emulators already installed for Android. I also happen to have my Android phone actually plugged into the machine. And you can see at the very top there, it says Samsung Android 8. That's this device. I could actually just deploy it right to this device and run the app right here. I'm going to leave it on an emulator just to start, but I'm going to go ahead and run it while he explains kind of what's going to happen here.
Fantastic. So Mark is both compiling and running it. So he's compiling the shared code. But more importantly, he's compiling the Android application. As Mark mentioned, it's a true native, proper Android application. It's not a single binary that runs on all platforms. It's a native Android app. And so he's compiling the app. It's going to deploy to his phone.
Well, it's going to deploy to the emulator first, but...
Oh, sorry, on the emulator. My apologies. Yes, yep. So we're deploying to the emulator, and then we're going to run our Xamarin.Forms application. And what you'll see is you're going to see the UI come up that's represented by our XAML, our XML here. And we'll give this a moment, but you'll see, well, you're going to see welcome to Xamarin.Forms.
Yeah. And this XAML file actually also has, if you notice in the Solution Explorer, a code behind file that goes with it, just a C# file. And so this is where I could place business logic. This is where my event handlers might be if I had UI elements that perhaps needed some sort of interaction, like I want to be able to tap on a button or interact with some control. I would put my code here to be able to do that.
And I think what's really key there is it's just C#. And these are, for .NET C# developers, these are standard practices. It's full-blown C#. Are we on 7.0 support?
For C#, 7, yeah,
yes.
7. Yeah, actually, yeah, it supports 7.3, in fact, all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the latest versions.
So for C# developers, they're going to be very comfortable to use the exact same patterns of using for other technologies, other types of applications. And it means that your C# developers, or if you are a C# developer, you can jump in and start making mobile applications, cross-platform applications with Xamarin. And so we can see here.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I know you guys probably can't see it very easily, but down here in the output window, you'll see things like it's signing a jar file. Anybody know what a jar file is in Java? Right?
I've got a few.
It really is essentially linking to the same SDK libraries, the same things that you would use if I were using, say, Android Studio or any other IDE tool to build an Android app. And now it's starting the Android application. So the application's built. It's now actually putting it on the simulator, installing it.
You know, what's interesting too is the simulator itself is actually coming from, this is part of the Android tooling.
Correct.
Right? So we actually are leveraging the Android tools along with Visual Studio. So we're getting the full support of Android, the full Android API surface, and all the wonderful tools that ship with Android from Google. Same thing with iOS. If we're doing iOS development, again, we would be going against the iOS APIs, get 100% API coverage. And we're not going to show this today just because of time, but you can actually deploy from Visual Studio on Windows to an emulator running on a Mac and actually visualize it on your PC and do your debug and visualize and test your applications on a PC for your iOS development. And how are we doing here?
Well, yeah, it says it's.
We know what we could do. We could show off some cross-platform. We could deploy the UWP version as well.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not so.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't plug in my laptop, so it's running on battery, which means it cuts the CPU side down. So no, normally not, but yeah, there it goes.
Hey,
okay.
Excellent, yeah.
So notice that I'm in the debugger now. I mean, we could set breakpoints in here just like you could in any other sort of application style. I can investigate variables, stop at any point and sort of look at what's happening in the system. And then you can see we have our welcome to Xamarin.Forms.
Very nice. So let's see if we can't add a little more to our UI here, Mark. So let's go over to our XML, our XAML definition. Now, Mark mentioned we have some UI here with a stack layout, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It puts our UI in a stack. And by default, it goes top to bottom. So we put things within in our stack layout definition, and they'll just go in order, top to bottom. So Mark's going to add a label here. Perfect. Excellent. So yes, we're going to set it up so we'll have a little bit of UI to both display text, pull in some data from the user. We're going to ask them for their name. And then I think we'll add some interactivity. So maybe a button. Fantastic. Mark is flying through it. And then we're going to have another piece of UI, which we'll do in the code behind, I guess, won't we, Mark?
Yep. And I'm just going to give the two of those a name.
Excellent. So we're going to label, display static text. We have an entry field that reads in the text, and then I'll have a button. And then Mark in the code behind is going to wire up an event to the button. So when you click the button, this code is going to get triggered, and then we'll do a little bit of work. And in this case here, we're going to read in the data from the user, and we're going to just display a message, a nice greeting. And he's using something called an alert. He's called display alert here. Now this is really interesting. Now this feels very simple. It's very much it's an introductory demo here, but this is actually really powerful. So he's going to call display alert here. So again, think about what we're doing. We're working in a .NET Standard 2.0 library. So we're working in shared code. But Mark is doing UI work in that shared code. And this call here, display alert, is going to pop up a little modal dialog. Now that is actually different on every platform. The way iOS does that is different. The way Android does that different. The way Windows does that, it's all different. But Xamarin.Forms has abstracted some of that. So we can use this really nice, really simple API call. It's called display alert. And it's going to pop up this dialog. And it's going to work correctly on the executing platform. In our case here, Android. So let's see how Mark's coding skills are here. And we'll just give this one moment. Fantastic. So hi there. Enter your name. That's my name. Perfect. And let's push the button. And we see a dialog. And again, this is an Android dialog. This is an Android alert. This is specific, unique to Android. And notice it looks like an Android application because we're leveraging native controls. Our UI definition is shared, but when it's compiled and executed, it's mapping to native controls. So you're always getting native applications running with native UI.
So I'm just going to switch to the UWP app just to see what it looks like. So now we're going to build the UWP version. Again, this is a different app, but it's sharing all that logic. So all the stuff that we just built to create that UI, the logic that we just added for the button click, all of that is shared. Right? So we're going to use that same library, exactly, the same binary library that we just built for Android. We're going to now use it in this UWP app.
And this is really interesting. Of course, we're running it here on a PC, on Mark's laptop here. Again, puts the name. And again, notice, this is a Windows-style dialog, right? It's running Windows 10. It looks like a Windows native control because it is a Windows native control. But this is now UWP. So that's Universal Windows Platform. So that runs on laptops, runs on desktops, runs on tablets.
Right, runs on Xboxes.
Runs on Xboxes, holographic, runs on Windows IoT. So this is actually really powerful. We've got now an API, we've got a UI definition and shareable code that runs on a huge range of devices.
So you want to introduce
the
Minutes app?
Do we have time?
Yeah.
Have time? You guys have 5 more minutes?
Yeah, we have a couple more minutes.
Let's do it.
We have
all right.
3 minutes.
We got 3 minutes. We'll go fast. Okay, so we're going to introduce another app. It's a little more complicated, called Minutes. And this is really here designed to show off fairly standard practice in mobile applications. And in this case here, it's to record meeting minutes. So we're going to enter data. We're going to store it on the device. We're going to display it in a list, give you some editing features. Now, we're going to go quickly here, but what's really exciting is we actually have full instructions on how to build this application, start to finish, online on GitHub. So we'll give that link in just a minute. So if you're interested in trying this out, we're not going to walk you through a hello world example. We're going to walk you through a very real world example that stores data. Yeah,
and you can actually go through we'll give you the GitHub repo, and it gives you full instructions on how to build it. So step by step, you can go through that yourself and actually build this application.
So have a look here at the Solution Explorer, and this is all going to look really familiar. Of course, now we've got a real name for our application. We've called this one Minutes. I see our Android head project, our iOS head project, our Windows head project. And again, there's our old friend, our .NET standard library.
Yep.
Now, instead of just main page, though, we've got a couple other pages. We just defined more UI. And we've added some backing logic. Do you want to open up? Let's open up note entry quickly.
Oh, OK. Note entry. Got it.
So this is really just standard C#. This is just a little class that represents our note or our entry. So every time we save a note, this is just a model object, plain old C#. If you're a coder, you're going, yeah, since before. And if you're not, I'll say that your team, the developers, they'll be right at home with this.
And notice here, we're actually using this file entry store to be able to store this locally on the device. This is all just .NET standard to go get a folder. Then to notice that we're actually just using path combine here. This is the system.io class. We're using standard file stream kind of stuff, so being able to store a file. But it does the right thing on Android, iOS, UWP. If we wanted to, we could run this on a Mac. We could run it with WPF. There's just all kinds. We could run it on a watch, I suppose, if you really wanted to.
And this is, I'm going to point out this is really exciting because this is new with .NET Standard. It's another case like that display alert where you would normally have to think about how to do this on each platform. Because of course the file system on iOS is different than the file system on Android. .NET Standard is taking care of this. So we can now put all of our file API calls in our shared library. It all just works.
Yep. And here's the app actually running on a phone. So I installed the app onto my Android device, just clicked run right here using the Samsung device. And you can see here I can enter in a new entry. Hi there.
How about hi there and watch James Montemagno's presentation on
Yeah, that's a good idea. So I'll just put that in the notes. Watch. I can't ever spell his name. We're just going to call it Mott's.
Perfect.
That's what he goes by later today.
And so there's a really cool presentation later today on Xamarin Essentials, which talks a lot about how to use cross-platform features without having to write a lot of code. Really cool. I'm not going to give it all away, but definitely recommend you go see it.
Yep, and you can see now it's actually stored on the device. I could close the device, come back. The note is still there. It's all persistent. I could store it in the cloud if I wanted to. We could share these notes with someone else. It's a very, very simple app. It's very easy to put together.
But very powerful. I mean, data persistence.
Yeah.
We've got some great standard controls, list views, interactivity, multiple screens. Really great way to get a sense of how you would go about creating, a more complicated cross-platform business application.
Yep. You can go to this link right here, AKAMS, XAMU Ignite, and go see those instructions. Download this app yourself, and give it a shot on your own devices.
Yeah. Full source code, full instructions. And yeah, build your own cross-platform mobile application.
Awesome. Xamarin.Forms in 20 minutes or less.
Yeah, that was good.
Sweet.
We're right at the end of our time, but any questions before we head out?
What's that? Yeah, sure. You bet. There you go.
So I think the question is it's really using native features of the phones. I'll say it that way. So actually that's perfect. So what I'm going to do is I can tell you to watch actually what we just talked about, James Montemagno's session on Xamarin Essentials. But the longer answer is a lot of the common features that are unique to the platform, things like camera, where again that API is different. Well, people have written what we call plugins that make it really easy. So they'll do the work of making the camera work on Android and iOS and Windows, and then you can use their plugin, pull that into your application via a NuGet package, and you don't do the work again.
Right.
But Xamarin Essentials has taken probably about 20.
Yeah, the most common things like location, camera, media, that sort of thing, and they've got cross-platform bits that will do the right thing on each platform for you, so that you can do that.
Yeah, and so
very cool. And if anyone has any questions, we actually have a booth in the developer section. So if you look for Visual Studio Tools for Xamarin, we'll be there. You can come by and talk to us. And of course, you can come up and talk to us after this session as well. But I think we're out of time.
I think so. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.